In the dead of night, on a day when the veil between worlds is said to be thinnest, the sounds that break the silence are often the ones that shouldn't be heard. But what happens when those sounds come not from the shadows beyond, but from right outside your door? On Halloween night, in a quiet house, one woman is about to find out, and it will be a night she'll never forget. Lisa Thompson had always enjoyed Halloween, the thrill of the eerie holiday, the costumes, the decorations. It all brought back fond childhood memories. But this year, things were different. She had recently moved to a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of town, far from the bustle of the city she once called home. It was her first Halloween alone in the new house, and while she had stocked up on candy for any trick-or-treaters, none had shown up. The night felt unnervingly still, the kind of quiet that makes you second-guess every creak and rustle. To pass the time, Lisa decided to watch an old horror movie, one of her favorites, the kind that gave her just the right amount of chills without keeping her up all night. She curled up on the couch, the glow of the TV flickering against the darkened room. Outside, the wind howled, sending leaves skittering across the porch like restless spirits. Halfway through the movie, Lisa heard it, a knock at the door. It was soft, barely audible, almost like a whisper against the wood. She paused the movie, her heart skipping a beat. She glanced at the clock, 11:37 p.m. It was far too late for trick-or-treaters. Maybe it's a neighbor, she thought, though the unease in her gut told her otherwise. She stood up slowly, making her way to the door. Peering through the peephole, she saw nothing. The porch was empty, the street silent. Shrugging it off as a trick of her mind, she returned to the couch, pressing play. 15 minutes passed. Just as Lisa was beginning to get lost in the movie again, the knock returned, louder this time, more insistent. It echoed through the quiet house, sending a shiver down her spine. She muted the TV, straining to listen for any other sounds, but all she could hear was the wind outside. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice wavering slightly. No response. Lisa's hand hovered over her phone. She considered calling someone, anyone, but dismissed the idea, feeling foolish. It was probably just a prank, she told herself. Kids messing around on Halloween night. But when she checked the door again, the same empty porch greeted her. The streetlights flickered ominously, casting long shadows that danced across the pavement. Her nerves were on edge, every hair on her body standing on end. Determined to shake off the fear, Lisa returned to the couch. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The movie, once thrilling, now seemed like background noise to the creeping dread building inside her. As midnight approached, the atmosphere in the house grew heavier, oppressive. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind, seemed amplified in the silence. Lisa was no longer focused on the movie. Her eyes kept darting to the door, expecting another knock. And then it came. 3 sharp raps that echoed through the house like gunshots. Lisa jumped, her pulse racing. This time she didn't hesitate. She grabbed her phone and slowly approached the door, her fingers trembling as she dialed 911, but before she could hit the call button, she froze. Through the peephole, she saw a figure, tall, dressed in dark clothes and wearing a mask, a grotesque, twisted face that looked half human, half demon. The figure stood motionless on her porch, staring directly at the door as if it knew she was watching. Lisa's breath hitched in her throat. She backed away slowly, trying to keep quiet. Her mind raced, trying to decide what to do. She couldn't stay in the house, but running out the front door was out of the question. Suddenly, the figure moved. The doorknob rattled violently as the intruder tried to force their way inside. Lisa's heart pounded in her chest. She ran to the kitchen, grabbing the largest knife she could find. The rattling stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that was somehow even worse. The silence was broken by the sound of shattering glass. Lisa's blood ran cold as she realized the figure had broken a window. They were inside. Panic surged through her veins as she frantically searched for a place to hide. She darted down the hallway, slipping into the small, cramped laundry room. The door creaked as she closed it, and she held her breath, praying that the intruder hadn't heard. Footsteps echoed through the house, slow and deliberate. The sound of something being dragged across the floor followed, a sickening scrape that set her teeth on edge. The footsteps grew closer, stopping just outside the laundry room door. Lisa pressed herself against the wall, clutching the knife so tightly her knuckles turned white. A soft, almost playful knock echoed against the door. Lisa's breath hitched. The door handle twisted slowly, but the door remained closed. The figure seemed to linger for a moment, as if savoring her terror. Then, the footsteps moved away, disappearing into the depths of the house. Lisa knew she couldn't stay hidden forever. She needed to get out, to escape this nightmare. She crept out of the laundry room, her senses on high alert. The house was eerily quiet, the only sound the distant hum of the TV still playing in the living room. She made her way toward the back door, her heart pounding in her ears. Just as she reached for the doorknob, a shadow loomed behind her. She spun around, but it was too late. The masked figure was there, towering over her. The last thing she saw before everything went black was the gleam of a blade. Lisa awoke to pain, sharp, searing pain radiating through her body. She was on the floor, blood pooling around her. The figure stood over her, the mask obscuring any hint of humanity. She could barely move, her limbs heavy and unresponsive. The knife she had grabbed lay inches from her hand, but it might as well have been miles away. The figure knelt beside her, the cold eyes behind the mask studying her like a predator savoring its prey. Lisa's vision blurred, her consciousness slipping in and out. She could hear the distant wail of sirens approaching, but it felt like a dream, something far removed from the horror unfolding in front of her. With a final rasping breath, Lisa managed to whisper, "Why?" The figure tilted its head, as if considering her question. But no answer came. Instead, the intruder slowly stood up, wiping the blood from the blade with a cloth. The sirens grew louder, closer, but the figure showed no sign of panic. Instead, it calmly turned and walked out the back door, disappearing into the night just as the flashing lights of police cars illuminated the street. The police arrived moments later, bursting into the house with guns drawn. They found Lisa barely clinging to life, her blood staining the floor, but the killer was gone, vanished into the darkness without a trace. Paramedics rushed her to the hospital where she hovered between life and death, her mind replaying the nightmare over and over again. The investigation that followed turned up little evidence. No fingerprints, no DNA, no witnesses, just the lingering sense of dread that haunted the house long after the crime. The masked figure had come and gone like a ghost, leaving behind nothing but fear and unanswered questions. As Lisa recovered in the hospital, she couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. The memory of those cold, unblinking eyes behind the mask haunted her every waking moment. The police assured her that she was safe, but deep down, she knew the truth. Somewhere out there, the killer was still watching, still waiting. And next time, they might not leave her with a second chance. Sometimes, the scariest monsters are the ones that hide in plain sight, their faces obscured, their motives unknown. On Halloween night, Lisa learned that evil doesn't always wear a familiar face. It can come knocking when you least expect it, and it might just be the last thing you ever see.